So, Dad, what can people do then if they're finding it hard to visualize their goals? Because I imagine a lot of people would come to you, for example, with depression, and one of the things that depression takes from people is those positive emotions for their values in certain ways. So, what can people do if they're in a situation where they're just not feeling those positive emotions? Maybe they're in a situation where they're a bit numb to the negative emotions as well, and they're just finding it hard to identify some of those values, because it's not the sort of thing that immediately comes to mind for everyone. It's not as if everyone carries around a little card with all of their major passions and values in life. And quite often, as we said before, that can change for people throughout life. So how do people go about it if they're struggling to identify exactly what those values are?
Right, well, I like that question because I think that's a deep question that gets me to think about it a bit more. And yes, I think you're right. It is a bit glib to suggest that as readily as that, people might just be able to visualize this is my ideal work setting or ideal relationship, and then thinking, oh, these are ways I can go about that. Oh, I think that's an important point. And when you mention, for example, people who are depressed, yes, you're quite right. When people who seek therapy and they're depressed, often people have got very little idea of even their sense of identity or their direction in life, and that actually adds to their pain. And their main goal is actually to become less depressed, but they haven't got much idea how to go about it. Or someone's goal might be to become less anxious or to quit an addiction, but not necessarily quite know how to go about that. So they're seeing a therapist to look for the strategies that can help deal with that. But we're talking about something deeper, aren't we, in terms of values and identifying that, which also relates to something we've talked about before, the notion of destiny, or what the Romans called genius, or the Greeks called daemon, having the idea of what we're for, if you like, in life. And our values are partly what do we want to stand for? And so part of our sense of destiny can be, well, what am I on this planet for, kind of thing. And these aren't easy things necessarily at times to identify. And many people would take much of a lifetime getting more of an idea of what is important to them that way. And that's where I think it's really worthwhile and practical to come back to the character strengths. And that's where our podcast started, with looking at identifying your signature character strengths and how we can draw on them, the best in us, to help deal with the challenges of COVID and lockdown. That's where this podcast started. But I think also, if we identify and act on our top character strengths, that also is another way that can be, if you like, an alternative for considering our destiny or what direction might we go in. If we can engage in projects that draw on our top character strengths, our curiosity, zest, social intelligence, kindness, if we act in ways in our daily life, or even choose to act on our top character strengths in novel ways, each day think of one or two different ways that we can draw on our top character strengths. That's another way that can give us some kind of purpose or direction. And one of the things I like about that is it's not getting caught up with some specific goal or outcome. It's remembering it's the process of drawing on the best in us. It's just like the process of working towards an ideal. If we have ideals, it's to provide us with the direction. It's not to be an expectation that we should always meet those ideals. I will always be supportive or caring or responsible or competent. We're not always going to be able to live up to those values. We can still strive to, though, and find if we slip up in some ways, we can look to get back to that. But the same thing with character strengths. If we act on our top character strengths, that is going to be consistent with what's most important to us. That's going to be consistent with us being authentic. And sometimes if people do act on their top character strengths, just say if it was curiosity and creativity and they took up some new hobby or pursuit, who knows, that might actually lead on to some kind of activity that becomes paid work down the track. So I think that if people are unsure about direction in life, if people are not quite sure what's most important to them or what ideals they might have, I think going back to the basics of that positive psychology exercise of identifying and looking to act on our top character strengths helps. And we use this with people who are depressed. When people have improved their mood to a certain point, we've used the usual cognitive behavioural strategies or ways of helping boost people's mood. once people are feeling a little bit more themselves again, or more their usual selves, we often introduce the character strengths and invite people to act on their top strengths in certain ways, and that's ways that it can help people find more direction in their everyday life.